Hello, everyone. We're back here. We're going to be talking about Revelation chapter 15, and we'll probably be getting started into Revelation chapter 16. And again, I don't have me and my brother don't have anything against anyone or any place, any person personally. The reason why we're doing this is so that people can know what's the truth and what is not, and so that we understand where we are in prophecy and what's to come, because we don't want our brothers and sisters to be blind. We want people to know what's
we need to know
going on.
We need to love all our brothers and sisters, whether they be in the church or not. But we must, we have nothing against people or any church or groups, but we can hate the doctrines and the teachings that are false and that are dangerous to our souls. This we are allowed to do. We're allowed to hate sin, and we're allowed to hate the false teachings and the false doctrines that are dangerous. And this is what we're talking about. The doctrines and the teachings of the beast and the papacy and that system of religion. The people aren't the problem. It's the teachings, the doctrines, the traditions, and the practices. This is what the Lord is telling us not to do and to avoid. And this message is to all people, regardless of where they're from or what they believe. It's God's loving way of pointing out what is dangerous and what is not. And this is what we're also reading in the book of Revelation. It's called the book of Revelation as in like Jesus revealing his full plan to John in visions. This is what we're reading here.
Okay, we're going to start reading here. I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. So we're talking about, we're about to introduce the 7 plagues, or as they call the 7 vials, and the called the 7 plagues because they use similar language to the exact plagues that happened in Egypt. And I think that's very interesting that they're using the 7 plagues that are happening in Egypt, and it's actually using those same plagues to shadow what these 7 vials were going to be. And the reason why these 7 vials, remember these 7 angels or the 7 plagues, is because it said that the people did not repent. They did not change from what they were doing. And we still have these systems of religion and this same kind of stuff going on. So God is bringing upon his wrath upon mankind in their sin. And also a judgment against the apostate church and the fake church and the religion of the beast and the Antichrist. So we're going to continue. So it says here, that glass saw it, as it were, a sea of glass mingled with fire. And them that had gotten the victory over the beast and over his image and over his mark and over the number of his name stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. This is talking about the Reformation. And so they had victory over, they started getting victories over the religion of the beast and the Antichrist. And that's what it's talking about. And so this is talking about the Reformation in full force and the subsequent wars and battles that were happening, that are waging in Europe. So Europe is mostly Europe is the battlefield in these 7 vials, because they're a judgment and the wrath of God upon this religion and this institution that was introduced, the institution of the Antichrist in Revelation 13:14. So we're going to continue on. It says here, who shall not fear thee, O Lord, and glorify thy name? For thou only art holy. For all nations shall come and worship before thee. For thy judgments are made manifest. And after that I looked, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven was opened. And the 7 angels came out of the temple, having the 7 plagues, clothed in pure and white linen, and having their breasts girded with golden girdles. And one of the 4 beasts gave unto the 7 angels 7 golden vials. This is why it's called also the 7 vials or the 7 plagues. It's the same. They were talking about the same seven events that are from of the wrath of God at this time. And it said the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no man was able to enter into the temple till the seven plagues of the seven angels were fulfilled. It says no man was able to enter the temple, the throne of God. So obviously, here we go again. This is very clear that the redeemed have not entered into the throne of God or into God's domain in heaven until these seven vials be fulfilled. So there's no rapture. These are talking about saints. We're talking Revelation chapter 15. The saints are still there, and they're waging war, and they're being successful, having some level of success. The Reformation was going full force. And so it's again, the Lord is telling us that how do we know that we're not finished? Because the seven vials had to be poured out first before us, the redeemed, would enter in and would receive our full salvation. Okay, this is what it was saying, that these seven vials have to be finished before that happens. So I think this is really important. So again, this actually again shows that the futuristic interpretation is not a correct one, but also at the same time, there are future events that we've been talking about that haven't occurred yet. But these are events that have occurred yet, clearly. And so we would be nowhere near the Lord's return if these seven vials haven't been pretty much all poured out. And we're going to explain to you which vial we're in. And we'll explain to you in world history where we are at the present moment.
In the present moment, we've actually began to enter into the seventh vial, the last one, which is the one that leads to the full destruction and demise of Babylon, ancient and the mystery Babylon and the papacy, right before this full judgment and the Lord's return. So we're right in the last vial, right before the Lord's return. This is where we are in history, waiting for that great event in the full judgment upon mystery Babylon and that papacy and the Antichrist and that system of religion. This is where we are.
So, okay, we're going to start with that. We'll start Revelation chapter 16. It says, I heard a great voice of the temple saying to the seven angels, go your ways and pour out the vials of the wrath of God upon the earth. So now we're going to start with the first vial. And I'm going to have to go back on my verses and make sure I get these correct. Okay, so it says here, and the first went and poured out the vial upon the earth. There fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. And okay, so when the Reformation started going, we're talking about the Black Death, actually. This is a clear reference to the Black Death that ravaged Europe up to still, and it continued into the years of the Reformation. And what happened? The bubonic plague, it was called the Black Death, was also called the bubonic plague. And bubonic means, it was talking about a thing called buboes, B-U-B-O-E-S, which actually is a boil or a sore. So again, this is clear reference to the Black Death, I believe, that was hitting Reformation. Well, it started in the Dark Ages, continued on into the Reformation time. And this was a judgment upon the false church and the church of the Antichrist. And so that's the first vial. Okay. Second vial, we're going to go to the second vial here. The second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. And I believe this was a big naval battle where a tremendous slaughter. And I believe this is talking about the Spanish Armada, where the papacy had a huge idea that they would gather together the nations, the 10 kings, they gathered up and they created this big navy, and they were going to beat the Protestant nations and defeat them. And so the naval power that stood up to them was actually England. What happened was King Henry VIII had split up from the Roman Catholic Church, created his own Church of England, or the Anglican Church or Church of England. And what happened was Protestantism and other and Puritanism and all these other and Baptists and all this, they came, and these groups who were against the papacy, they had a huge naval battle called the Spanish Armada in 1588, and I think this is that second vial. And what happened was it took away the naval power of the papacy and those 10 kings, and it moved it to the nations of the Reformation, and they had a huge victory, scored a huge victory here. And they said God did it. God did it. It was incredible weather that went in favor of England, and it blew the ships into the rocks, and most of their armada was completely destroyed, with very little loss of life on the English side and their allies. So I believe that would be a good definition of what it was talking about here, because it talked about in the sea and about a lot of and it would be polluted. And again, this is actually, it talks, it's also like Moses when one of the plagues was when the river turned into blood. So again, this is a plague or a judgment on the the unrighteous. So here we go. We'll continue on. So with the third vial, and the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and the fountains of waters, and they became blood. And again, now we're going to be talking about. I believe this is talking about the French Revolution, and all of Europe was having civil war and tremendous issues and problems. And so we're talking about all the wars that the Europeans were fighting against each other, and a lot of them were fought on rivers, the strategic rivers in Europe. And so I believe this is that time, and this is that vial, and so a lot of people were being killed at this time. And so that was the wrath of God being poured upon the false religion of the beast and the Antichrist. And I'll keep going. We'll keep going here. I'll go to the next vial here. So here we go. And it says, and why would this judgment come upon? It said, for they have shed the blood of the saints and prophets. Thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. And I heard another out of the altar say, even so, Lord God Almighty, true and righteous are thy judgments. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. And men were scorched with great heat, and blasphemed the name of God, which had power over these plagues, and they repented not to give him glory. So again, I'm going to go back, refer back to my notes here. And so here we are, we're continuing to the fourth. And this definitely, I would say, was the probably issues of the birth and the use of fire. And so now we're talking about, Napoleon, and starting to go into more about Napoleon and the French Revolution, leading into Napoleon, where the fifth vial was where he went to the very seat of the beast, and Napoleon actually led the Pope in chains and basically removed the power that the Pope had over all these 10 kingdoms. And so they lost their empire aspect. They did not lose their spiritual and religious aspect, but they lost their empire power at this point. This is when the Holy Roman Empire came to its end by Napoleon. And so the wars in Europe with the other vial in the fourth one, the birth of modern warfare with not tanks, but cannons and artillery, which the victors over the other European powers. That's actually how they got. That's why Napoleon was successful in his attacks. And this leads to the fifth vial, where it says it poured on the vial upon the seat of the beast. So this is clearly showing that this vial literally was against the papal Rome. We're talking about Napoleon coming in and doing his thing. This is that fifth vial. And the kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed for their tongues through pain and blasphemed for God of heaven because of their pains and their sores, and repentance not of their deeds. So again, there was disease, pestilence happening still, and also they had not repented. They had not changed what they were doing, persecuting the saints and martyring the saints. So what happened was, these judgments continued to happen. And this time it came right to their doorstep. It said the seat of the beast, which was the papal Rome, which was in the Vatican. So it came right to their doorstep. And that's the fifth vial. And now we're going to go into the next vial, which is the sixth vial. And we're going to talk about the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates. And the water there was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of the great day of the God Almighty. This is going to lead up to Armageddon. This is going to lead up to the great battle of Armageddon, just before the Lord's return. So they said this fifth vial was going to lead up to all this, and the sixth vial. Sorry, and so we can clearly see the sixth vial now is saying that the Euphrates were being dried up, and if we remember, there was talking about the trumpets, yeah, and the trumpets were talking about the same group, and this is talking about the Turks, which was the last great Muhammadan Islamic empire that had influence over Israel, the land of Israel and Jerusalem. And so this is the only one that where it has less to do with Europe, because all the other previous vials were distinctly with Europe and involving the judgments upon the papacy. This one is actually the judgment upon the Turks, and how that the judgment of the Turks and the destruction of the Turkish Empire. It talks about the Euphrates being dried up. Well, the Turkish Empire came to its end in World War I. So this is why. Why did World War I? Why World War I? What was the conclusion? Well, the reason why World War I, and the reason why this sixth vial was to destroy that power, the power over of the Gentiles, the judgment of the Gentiles was finished at this point as well. So now that Jerusalem was freed by the destruction of the Turkish Empire, and the British were the ones who freed them, and then the British are actually the tribe of Joseph, the tribe of Ephraim in America, the tribe of Manasseh, and all the European powers, which are the tribes of Israel. They're all tribal Israelites. So we're talking about natural Israel here, being finally victorious over the Gentile nations that ruled over them, and were being used as a judgment of, this is talking again the 7 times sin punishment, and then of course it's revealed again here in Revelation, where the devil was persecuting first Israel and the Jews, and then also he was persecuting the church. And so here we are. These are the judgments for those who are persecuting the saints. And so again, the Turkish Empire was persecuting the Jews heavily. They weren't allowed to do their thing, but also they're very, very hard on the Christians. And so they basically converted all the churches, and they didn't allow really any Christian churches, and Christianity took a real big hit. And that's pretty much when Christianity in the Middle East had come to an end. Like there was few pockets here or there, but this is really where it really took a hit. And that is under the Turkish Empire. actually the Arab rulers were less tough on the Christians than the Turkish Empire was. And so finally, they were finally defeated. And that's what it's talking about, the Euphrates being dried up. And so this is the sixth vial is World War One. So, and the whole reason why World War One is the conclusion for Israel to be made a nation, like in multiple prophecies, and that the 7 times punishment would be ended. And now I think I'm not going to get to the full end of this chapter, but we're talking about some frogs, evil spirits, and the false church. And I believe that's talking about the ecumenical movement.
That's right.
Where they brought in, it seems all good, and they wanted to make the papacy seem good and all their teachings okay, and they wanted to make peace with the Protestant movement and the evangelical movements, and even tried to make peace with the Islam, with the Muslims as well, with the great religion of Islam that was be using as a judgment. And here in this last vial, the sixth vial, and so it's going to come up where verse 15 saying that another angel came out of the temple crying, verse 15, behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame, and gathered him together into the place of the Hebrew tongue. Armageddon. So now we're talking about Armageddon. So we had to have the sixth vial poured out, World War I. And I believe that this Armageddon World War II was a shadow of this battle of Armageddon that was to come. Where,
And this is part of what it talks about in 14. The evil spirits and the working
frogs,
of miracles,
right,
and the frogs.
Correct.
And the whole earth was gathered together for battle. World War II was where the alliances were drawn up. Everything was prepared. As it says, they're prepared for battle. So World War II is included in this. It's talking about the preparing of the nations for battle. World War II was exactly that. It was a type and shadow of Armageddon, but it was also the gathering of the people for that event. World War II is a pivotal point, an event that began this gathering, as we read about in this verse 14.
And verse 17, and the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air. Very interesting that he poured it into the air. And there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven, that throne, saying, it is done. And there was trumpets that could be heard in Jerusalem in 2017. It was a great event that even non-believers and Orthodox Jews and everybody heard it. So I believe this was the trumpet that was bringing in this seventh vial. So we want to know where we are. Well, we're in the seventh vial. I believe the seventh vial has begun. This is where we are in Revelation. This is where we are in this time frame, just before Armageddon happening. And also before this Armageddon, again, the Mystery Babylon has to be judged and brought to an end. So this is where we are. And I'm going to leave it there. And there's a few more verses to talk about in, but it said that it was poured out in the air. So now we have all these diseases of the air, like COVID and all those things. And also, I believe it was also talking about the climate change, about the air, about the climate change, all the carbon dioxide. So these issues.
All
regarding
pollution,
the air.
all the death by pollution.
So
killing the birds in the sea and everything. Talking about this time of pollution and air and problems with the air. The diseases and problems that we have now. It's talking about modern day pollution and modern day viruses and illnesses.
And I don't know which one will be exactly first, but I believe that papacy will be dealt with first, and then shortly after will be Armageddon, and and it talks about that again, about Babylon falling, and a great earthquake. So we're going to have a great turmoil in the economy And all the governments will, it says that they will fail, they will not be able to solve the world's problems. So this is where we are.
Yep.
And so
we read about
we're gonna be running out of time.
Of hail with talents. Again, these kind of events are happening. Hail with the talents. It's things that are coming out of the air, and there's a lot of destructive and dangerous things that can come out of the air nowadays. And that's what it was referring to.
Like even nuclear bombs had
missiles.
Yeah,
I mean, referring to all the missiles, and bombs, and also there is also great hail also coming from the environment too, and asteroids, things like that. It's what it's referring to.
So we'll leave it there. I wanted to make the video a little bit shorter, but again, this is an important one, and I think a lot of people were wondering where we are. So I hope this clears up some things and answers some questions. So God bless you, everyone.
God bless.